you guys that are on Zoom. Looks like the folks are starting to come in to. Okay, sorry for all of you guys that are online through Zoom or through Facebook and YouTube. I didn't have the audio on, but it's on now. For those of you guys that are meditating with us, it's helpful to have your upper body erect. If you have your sternum up and your shoulders back, this will keep the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. It also makes it easier for you to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. So again, I'm going to ease us into meditation with some chanting, which you guys are welcome to join along in. Or if you'd like to just sit quietly and start focusing on the breath, it's up to you. But after the chanting, that's where I'm going to come in with the guidance. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Wat Tung Mahakawanang Apiwateyami Savakato Mahakawata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Arhasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusarang Bhoto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath, not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind focused on the breath, whenever the mind moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Wat Tung Mahakawanhang Apivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokavito Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusarang Bhuto Bhagavati. Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, I'll just welcome all of you guys, whether you're joining at Wat Tung or you're joining on Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Welcome to everyone. Welcome to our class today. This is our Pali Canon and English study group where we study the original words of the Buddha, more in a study group versus the traditional style of learning that I normally use in all of our other programs, where I typically will teach for maybe 15, 20, 30 minutes and then open up to questions and then teach another 15, 20, 30 minutes and open up to questions. Instead, what we do here is we go through our book series, volumes 2 through 13, over a year and a half. We study all the different chapters one by one using the original words of the Buddha. What I'm going to be doing is inviting a student either at Wat Tung or in Zoom. If you would like to volunteer to read, you can read these chapters that we're going to be studying. And after a student reads the chapter, then I'm going to share some teachings on that chapter. And then I'll open up to any and all questions that you have. Essentially, what we're doing here at Wat Tung, and I apologize for all of you guys that are there. I'm normally there to join you guys and guide the class from there, but I'm traveling. So since I'm traveling, I'm still teaching from here. What I normally do is I would be guiding students through all the various courses and retreats that we have in order to guide them to the enlightened mental state. What enlightenment is where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're no longer experiencing any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom. All of these discontent feelings and others are completely eliminated from the enlightened mind. So the way that I do that is through all the various classes, courses, and retreats that I share. And as you're training your mind in the teachings of the Buddha, you're not only experiencing the elimination of discontent feelings, but the mind will be focused, concentrated, you have clarity of mind and deep memory. You'll notice that you're not even in a bad mood anymore, that all your personal, professional relationships can really blossom. So if you're interested in moving the mind to this enlightened mental state where you no longer need to experience anger and sadness and frustration and all those discontent feelings, you can do that by starting off in our foundational programs and starting off with volume 1 of the book series. This Pali Canon and English study group, we're in volume 3 now, chapters 51 through 60. And here we're going to be studying some various chapters about some different things. And it's important that as you're studying the teachings of the Buddha, that you understand that nothing he taught is based in belief. As you can see from this first chapter, we're going to be talking about hell, the animal realm, the afflicted spirit realm. The Buddha actually taught 5 different realms. He taught hell, animal realm, afflicted spirits, the human realm, and the heavenly realm. And these are things that you can independently verify. The teachings of the Buddha aren't about a bunch of beliefs. They're also not about a bunch of rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship. They're not rules or commandments. Instead, he's teaching you how to cultivate wisdom so that you can awaken to the natural laws of existence. And as you're gradually learning and practicing his teachings, you're independently verifying whether they're true or they're false. And as you're doing that, you'll be able to gradually awaken to the wisdom of the path to enlightenment and move your mind closer and closer to this enlightened mental state. And you'll know that you're experiencing that because as you're making your way closer and closer to enlightenment, the discontentedness is gradually diminishing as you're making your way closer and closer to enlightenment. So this is just a little bit of information about the teachings of the Buddha. Some of the people that are joining here, they've been studying with me for a number of months or years, and they have a foundation in these teachings. And if this is your first time that you're studying with me, it's okay. You're going to surely learn something today, but just understand this isn't typically where a student would start. They would normally start in some of our foundational programs, like on Sunday and Wednesday, that's our group learning program, or each first full week of every month, I teach the Foundation and the Path to Enlightenment course. That's another great place to start. And there's various ways for you to get started on the path to enlightenment. But what today is all about is studying the original words of the Buddha. And I will invite anybody who's in Wat Tung or in Zoom, if you would like to volunteer to read this, just electronically raise your hand in Zoom. I'll be able to see that, and then you'll be able to actually read this first chapter. For those of you guys at the temple, you'll just need to electronically raise your hand in Zoom. But for any of you guys that are in the temple, you can actually read these chapters and we'll be able to hear you through the online Zoom and through the live stream, but you'll need a microphone. We have plenty of microphones there at the temple. All you need to do is get a microphone, press the gray button. You're going to see lights are going to come on. You just wait a second or two and you hold it up to your chin, and then we'll be able to hear you all throughout the live stream and through our online platforms that we're currently connected to at this point. So is there anybody at Wat Tung or anybody in Zoom that would like to volunteer to read this first chapter? Okay, it looks like someone at Wat Tung would like to read. Go ahead.
Chapter 51, leading to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. Monks, the destruction of life, repeatedly pursued, developed, and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, the destruction of life at a minimum leads to a short lifespan. Taking what is not given, repeatedly pursued, developed and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, taking what is not given at a minimum leads to a loss of wealth. Sexual misconduct, repeatedly pursued, developed and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, sexual misconduct at a minute leads to hostility and competition. False speech, repeatedly pursued and developed and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, false speech at a minimum leads to false accusations. Argumentative speech, repeatedly pursued, developed and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, argumentative speech at a minimum leads to being separated from one's friends. Harsh speech, repeatedly pursued, developed and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, harsh speech at a minimum leads to hearing disagreeable things. Idle chatter, repeatedly pursued, developed and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, idle chatter at a minimum leads to distrusting one's words. Drinking liquor and wine, ingesting of substances that cause heedlessness, repeatedly pursued, developed and cultivated, leads to hell, to the animal realm, and to the realm of afflicted spirits. For one reborn as a human being, drinking liquor and wine, ingestion of substances that cause heedlessness, at a minimum leads to madness.
Okay, thank you, Steve. This is a very rare discourse from the Buddha where he's actually giving you exact things that are occurring as a result of certain decisions that we make. If this is the first time you've ever seen the words of the Buddha, you might be like, oh no, he's like talking about hell and animal realm and afflicted spirits. This is very rare that you'll see the Buddha talking about certain actions that we do in this life that are going to lead to rebirth in a certain realm. Instead, what the Buddha is guiding you to be able to do is actually get to enlightenment in this life, where you can gradually cultivate your mind and see this cause and effect, or this action and result, understanding the natural law of Gotama. In the natural law of Gotama, to be able to understand exactly the results of any one particular decision, the Buddha teaches that it could lead to madness or frustration if you try to discern that. When we talk about awakening to enlightenment, this is the natural law that you're actually awakening to, is this natural law of Gotama, or some people refer to it as karma. The word karma is from the Sanskrit language, and the word Gotama is from the Pali language. This is a natural law that's a functioning at all times, and it's affecting all of us, whether we're aware of it or not. There's a certain cause, and then it leads to a certain effect, or there's a certain action that leads to a certain result. And if you can see more and more clearly that whatever you experience in life, either wholesome or unwholesome, it's actually coming from decisions that you're making. Oftentimes what we do in life, and when we have a lack of wisdom, is anything that's occurring in our life, we will tend to blame it on other people. Of course, if wholesome things are happening in our life, we tend to say, oh, that's because of me and everything that I'm doing. But if unwholesome things are occurring, we might try to blame it on someone else. Well, you can't have it both ways, right? You need to be able to see very clearly through the teachings of the Buddha that any wise decisions that you make, it's leading to wholesome results. And if there's any unwise decisions that you're making, it's going to lead to unwholesome results. If we continue to blame other people for the things that we experience, you're never going to be able to cultivate wisdom to be able to find your way out of continuous discontentedness that keeps repeating over and over and over again. So the beauty about embracing the natural law of Gotama and seeing the truth in it is that if there's anything that you don't particularly care for that's happening in your life, all you need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. But likewise, if you see certain wholesome things that are happening in your life, you can look at that, see what decisions that you made that led to those wholesome results, and now you can actually make more and more decisions with wisdom. But if we don't cultivate wisdom in this natural law, we'll continue to struggle and have difficulties by making the same repeated unwise decisions that are leading to unwholesome results. So here the Buddha is just helping you to be able to see some of the unwise decisions that could be made and what those actually lead to. And of course, all of these decisions that he's talking about lead to rebirth in hell, the animal realm, and afflicted spirits. But it's not that you just do this thing one time and you automatically are reborn into those realms. And those realms aren't permanent existences. In fact, there was someone that was living during the lifetime of the Buddha that killed 999 human beings. And this person actually ended up studying with the Buddha, training their mind and getting to enlightenment during that life. So whatever we've done in the past that was unwise, we can just put it in the past. It's in the past, but we need to be able to learn from these things so that we can make wiser and wiser decisions that are leading to more and more wholesome results. So here the Buddha goes through a number of different things that we could do that would be unwise. Like the first one is destruction of life. If we kill living beings, and we did that repeatedly. That's what he's saying here, that we repeatedly killed. If we repeatedly did that, then it's going to lead to potential rebirth in hell, animal realm, or afflicted spirits. But even if you're killing, there's the potential that you could be reborn in the human realm. And if you're reborn in the human realm, there's a shorter lifespan. And the reason why is because when you're killing, there's a certain amount of craving, anger, and what we call ignorance or unknowing of true reality. And this anger, this hostility, this bitterness that's in the mind, it's going to put stress and strain on the body. And as that's occurring, you're going to notice a shorter lifespan. So this is the cause and effect. And the Buddha is helping you to be able to see that if you have enough anger and craving to go out there and kill, you're going to have this shorter lifespan. And the reason why is not anything mystical or magical. It's just that the body is experiencing more stress and more difficulties because the mind is experiencing all that hostility and anger. And then we can go to this next one where he talks about taking what is not given. And this is stealing, right? And this is repeatedly stealing because there's got to be enough craving, desire, attachment there in order for that to be occurring. And he says, okay, you could end up being reborn in hell, animal realm, or afflicted spirit. He's not trying to scare you. He's not trying to guilt, shame, or fear you into doing anything. He's just sharing with you the natural law and helping you see what is a possibility. But also it's a possibility to be reborn in the human realm, even though one is stealing. And at a very minimum, what he's saying is this is going to lead to a loss of wealth. Because if you're stealing, people are going to essentially be stealing from you too. And he goes through each one of these and he talks about the same kinds of things. So sexual misconduct, for example, this leads to a minimum of hostility and competition. And for anybody who's done sexual misconduct where maybe you're going out and having sex outside of relationships that you're currently in, or any number of ways that we can commit sexual misconduct, which the Buddha shares in the 5 precepts, at a minimum, it leads to hostility and competition, where people are trying to compete with each other. This false speech, it leads to, at a minimum, false accusations, because people are going to make false accusations about you. And if you have argumentative speech, at a minimum, this leads to being separated from one's friends. Now, remember at the beginning of class and all the classes that I teach, I explain to you guys, don't believe the teachings of the Buddha, but instead you need to learn them, examine them, and investigate them. You need to reflect on them to independently verify them and practice them. And that's what's going to bring you the real results. So every single one of us at some point in our life has had argumentative speech where we've been arguing with people. So ask yourself, when you were arguing with people, is this what you experienced? Did you experience separation of your friends? In other words, did your friends, after you were bitter and harsh and hostile and argumentative, did they choose to go away from you and no longer be friends? And if you answer that yes, and you can see the truth in that, then you know and you can confirm independently that what the Buddha is sharing here is true. That when you have argumentative speech, at a minimum, it's going to lead to separation of your friends. And then you can go through all the rest of these and you can independently verify this. Here's one that maybe many of us have been involved in, where maybe we've taken substances that cause heedlessness. If we've taken substances that cause heedlessness repeatedly, then what the Buddha is saying is at a minimum, this leads to madness, right? So if you've been doing this, where maybe you've been using drugs and alcohol, then you can see that, yes, this is 100% true. The Buddha is showing you this cause and effect. Because oftentimes when we learn about substances, maybe our parents or our caregivers tell us it's unwise, but they don't exactly explain to us why. They just try to tell us not to do it, right? But the Buddha is explaining to you the cause and effect, or the action and result. So you can use a discourse like this to be able to further help you understand what this cause and effect is, so that more and more as you're learning, as you're reflecting to independently verify, and then as you're practicing, you can see the truth that choosing not to do any of these things is going to promote a more healthy mind, where your mind can be more peaceful and joyful, and you'll have a more peaceful and joyful life. So let me know if you guys have questions on this. You can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or if you're at the temple, you can also ask questions by just getting a microphone. Those of you guys at the temple, you'll have to just raise your hand electronically so I can see that and call on you. And those of you guys in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, you can even use the comment section as well to ask your questions. Okay, we have a question here coming in from Jose on YouTube. He's saying, "Hi, David. I'm listening to the audiobook volume 1, and I'm seeing things more different now than before. but I'm having some trouble when dealing with some people. I'm trying to be humble, but sometimes, and kind, but sometimes it's hard for me, and I feel aggravated and lost in this part of the process of meditating. Okay, Jose, there's certain things that you need to learn there, and it's best if I help you with that in one of our foundational classes, or maybe in like a personal guidance session. Right now, this isn't necessarily related to this aspect of our class. So if it's okay with you, I would like to invite you to schedule a personal guidance session with me, or maybe send me a personal message, or post in our Facebook group this type of question, and I can answer it for you there. It's a much better place to do that kind of thing. All right, so it looks like Wat Tung Yu has a question. If you guys would like to go ahead, you're welcome to.
Yeah, that's me. Thank you. So can you please explain how can there be so much craving behind idle chatter so as to be reborn in the lower realms? And I know I already asked the question about 3 months ago, but I still don't get it.
So whenever there's craving, anger, and ignorance in the mind, these are the three poisons, three unwholesome roots, there's going to be rebirth. So if you die with craving, anger, and ignorance in the mind, then there's going to be rebirth. But if you have craving, anger, ignorance in your mind, or here, let's just focus on craving because that's what produces idle chatter. It's not going to be just idle chatter that you're having craving for. You're going to have craving in other parts of your life too. So it's not just that this one thing of idle chatter is leading you to rebirth in hell, the animal realm, or afflicted spirits, but it's all the other cravings and anger and ignorance combined with this. It's not just this one tiny thing that's going to lead you to hell, the animal realm, or afflicted spirit. It's if you have craving for it and you're producing idle chatter, you're going to have cravings about other things as well.
And what about things like mental manipulation? So that would be like violence, but without causing bodily harm. Where does it fall into? What category?
You mean between craving, anger, and ignorance?
Yes, I mean, because the Buddha, I mean, we can sometimes, as humans, cause harm to someone, which is not bodily harm, right? Like someone can be destroyed in terms of their psyche. So where would that fall in the teachings? Like under what category?
You're not able to destroy someone's psyche. That's not actually possible. The way that you can cause harm to someone is you can cause harm to their physical body, you can cause harm to their material possessions, and you can cause harm to their reputation. But in terms of someone's mind, it's not possible to cause harm to someone's mind because you can't have access to someone's mind. It's an individual themselves that any kind of mental challenges that they're struggling with, they're the ones who are dealing with that, because an individual can't harm another person's mind. It's just not possible. If that was the case, then nobody would ever be able to get to enlightenment. Because if somebody could harm your mind, then your mind isn't protected, and now somebody could harm an individual's mind. It's just not possible.
So, for example, in toxic relationships, when people talk about psychological violence, this doesn't exist.
Yeah, it doesn't exist because if somebody's in a relationship that they're experiencing discontentedness in, the discontentedness is coming from their own mind. It's coming from craving, desire, attachment. And if that person isn't pleased in that relationship, they can make a choice to leave. They don't need to stay in that relationship. So if somebody, let's just say there's a boyfriend and girlfriend, and the boyfriend is constantly yelling or the girlfriend's constantly yelling, and the other person is just absorbing this constant verbal yelling, the other person can just choose to leave. They don't need to stay in the relationship. But because of craving and clinging, people oftentimes stay in the relationship. They'll label it as toxic, and then they'll blame the other person. When in reality, what they're experiencing there with the hostility coming from their partner, they can choose to leave. That's the unwholesome results of their decisions to crave and cling and hold on to that relationship. Because any kind of craving and anger and ignorance is going to lead to unwholesome results or unwholesome karma. So in this kind of relationship, I wouldn't label any relationship as toxic. That is labeling something, that is judging something, that is looking down on the situation. Instead, if the other person is being impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful, just leave the relationship. That's something that each individual person can choose to do. But oftentimes what people do is when they're in a relationship, any kind of painful feelings they're experiencing in their mind, they're going to attribute it to somebody else because they can't see with wisdom that it's their own mind that's causing these discontent feelings.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let me see if we have any questions anywhere else. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere else. So let's go to the next one, which is chapter 52. Is there someone who would like to volunteer to read this one?
Can I ask one more question?
Oh, sure.
One more question,
I'm sorry,
please.
I didn't see that. Yes, sir.
So so I have a question. First, it's my first time here, so this is really kind of enlightful and helpful. One question I have is regarding the alcohol, right? So to me, there's difference of kind of drinking beer and getting drunk. For me personally, as example, if I watch soccer with friends, right, a beer is about having a good time and friendship and get together. So I'm trying to understand how just drinking any liquor is related to a negative kind of a part of life.
Sure. So what the Buddha is guiding you to do is he's guiding you to get to this enlightened mental state where the mind's peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. And that's a permanent mental state. You no longer experience any anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All these feelings are completely eliminated from the mind. And the way that that's being accomplished is you're actually purifying the mind of the causes and conditions that are producing these discontent feelings. And in order to purify the mind, you need to have something called mindfulness or awareness of mind. In order to cultivate mindfulness, you're doing this through meditation, but you're also doing this in day-to-day life, that you're practicing awareness of mind or mindfulness. Because when you're aware of the mind, you can see the anger arising and you can cut it off and let it go. Or you can see the boredom and loneliness arising and you can cut it off and let it go. Or you can see the jealousy or the stress or anxiety and all these things. If you're training your mind regularly through the teachings of the Buddha, you can cut it off and let it go. If you're putting substances into the body, it's going to promote what's called heedlessness. Heedlessness is just the opposite of mindfulness. Heedlessness is where you have unattentiveness, unalertness, unawareness. And as long as you're taking substances that cause heedlessness, you're not going to be able to have mindfulness to make wise decisions that are working to purify your mind and making wise decisions to produce wholesome Dhamma or wholesome results. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're only making 100% wise decisions about the things that you're involved in. And because you're making wise decisions, it's producing wholesome results. But you can't make wise decisions when the mind is heedless. It's just not possible. Like here in Mexico, I just finished up a course and we were sitting at lunch and they were talking about a local resident who got drunk. He was riding his motorbike. He hit a car. The motorbike went under the car. He flipped over the car and he ended up now in a coma. And he's got some brain damage in his brain because he wasn't wearing a helmet, right? So these are the kind of things that our mind does when we're heedless, that we make unwise decisions that's going to lead to a cascading of events of unwholesome things occurring in our life. And an individual whose mind has been completely trained and purified, they're not going to have any need for alcohol or drugs or intoxicants, because the purpose of putting liquid into the body and putting substances into the body like food and things like this, it's to nourish the body. We don't need alcohol and drugs in the body. That's just going to promote this unattentiveness or unawareness, this heedlessness. And now we're going to make all these cascading unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome results in our life. Okay, not seeing any other questions anywhere. All right, so let's move on to the next chapter. Is there someone who would like to read this chapter? This is chapter 52. Looks like Pat's raising his hand. Go ahead, sir.
Chapter 52, reappear in a happy destination. But here, student, some man or woman, abandoning the killing of living beings, abstains from killing living beings. With rod and weapon laid aside, gentle and kindly he resides compassionate to all living beings. Because of performing and undertaking such action on the dissolution of the body after death, he reappears in a happy destination, even in the heavenly world. But if on the dissolution of the body after death, he does not reappear in a happy destination in the heavenly world, but instead comes back to the human state, then whenever he is reborn, he is long-lived. But here, student, some man or woman is given to injuring beings with a hand, with a clod, with a stick, or with a knife. Because of performing and undertaking such action on the dissolution of the body after death, he reappears in a happy destination in the heavenly world. But if instead he comes back to the human state, then whenever he is reborn, he is healthy. But here, student, some man or woman gives food, drink, clothing, carriages, garlands, scents, ointments, beds, dwelling, and lamps to ascetics or Brahmins. Because of performing and undertaking such action on the dissolution of the body after death, he reappears in a happy destination in the heavenly world. But if instead he comes back to the human state, then whenever he is reborn, he is wealthy. But here, student, some man or woman is not of an angry and irritable character. Even when criticized a little, he is not offended, does not become angry, hostile, and resentful, and does not display anger, hate, and bitterness. Because of performing and undertaking such action on the dissolution of the body after death, he reappears in a happy destination in the heavenly world. But if instead he comes back to the human state, then whenever he is reborn, he is beautiful. But here, student, some man or woman is not jealous, one who does not become jealous, resentful, and feel bitter about the gains, honor, respect, gratitude, salutations, and veneration received by others. Because of performing and undertaking such action on the dissolution of the body after death, he reappears in a happy destination in the heavenly world. But if instead he comes back to the human state, then whenever he is reborn, he is influential. But here, student, some man or woman is not stubborn and arrogant. He pays homage, respect, to one who should receive homage, respect, rises up for one in whose presence he should rise up, offers a seat to one who deserves a seat, makes way for one whom he should make way, and honors, respects, appreciates, and venerates one who should be honored, respected, appreciated, and venerated. Because of performing and undertaking such action on the dissolution of the body after death, he reappears in a happy destination in the heavenly world. But if instead he comes back to the human state, then whenever he is reborn, he is highborn. But here, student, some man or woman visits an ascetic or a Brahmin and asks, Venerable Sir, what is wholesome? What kind of action will lead to my welfare and peacefulness for a long time? Because of performing and undertaking such action on the dissolution of the body after death, he reappears in a happy destination in the heavenly world. But if instead he comes back to the human state, then whenever he is reborn, he is wise.
Okay, thank you, Pat. What I'd like to do is use this chapter and even the previous chapter to help you guys understand how to take a discourse like this and really use it to help you in your day-to-day life. Here, of course, the Buddha is giving you various actions and various decisions that you can make that are going to lead to potential rebirth and where that rebirth is and what could be potentially experienced on that next rebirth. Well, the ultimate goal is to get to enlightenment in this life and not be reborn anywhere. So while the Buddha is talking about these things, and this is true, that if you do these certain things, then it's going to lead to this particular rebirth or that particular rebirth, and this is what can be experienced in that rebirth. The way that you can take a chapter like this, and even the previous chapter as well, is you look at the things that the Buddha is teaching you that would be wise to do, and the things that are unwise to do, and be sure that you cultivate the wise things and you make decisions in that regard. And then the unwise things, you choose not to do those things. So for example, here, the Buddha is saying that it would be wise to abandon the killing of living beings and abstaining from killing beings, right? And because of this, living compassionately for all living beings. And he says, yes, okay, on the dissolution of the body, you're going to potentially be reborn in this heavenly world. But if you don't come back to the heavenly world and you're reborn into this world of the human world, then you're going to be long-lived. Okay, that's fine, but your ultimate goal is to get to enlightenment in this life. And the Buddha is guiding you to eliminate the pollutions of mind of craving, anger, and ignorance. So what you can take from this is it's unwise to kill any living beings. And you learn this in the 5 precepts. And then the Buddha goes down here and he explains about injuring beings, that it would be unwise to do that. Here he talks about giving food, drink, and all these different things to ascetics and Brahmins. These are the people who are sharing the teachings. Essentially what he's talking about here is practicing generosity to produce merit. Okay, he's talking about rebirth here, but set that aside. We don't need to focus on all the 5 realms. We don't need to focus on rebirth. What you're looking for is what is the wisdom that I can practice today to move my mind closer and closer to enlightenment. And practicing generosity is what's going to help you to do that. By giving and sharing more than is strictly required in any given situation, such as your time, effort, energy, and resources, without any expectation of anything in return, that's going to help you eliminate craving, desire, attachment. So focus on doing those kinds of things. Here, he's talking about ensuring that you don't have any hate in the mind, that there's bitterness that has been eliminated. You'd like to focus on that. Again, he's talking about rebirth and these kinds of things because that is true. And this actually helps you to understand why people are reborn beautiful versus people who are reborn that's not so beautiful. It's because of what happened in a previous life, but that's all in the past. Focus on this life and what is it that I need to do in this life? And what you need to do is eliminate your anger, your irritability, criticizing people, being offended by people, being angry and hostile and resentful. And the Buddha provides you teachings and tools to be able to eliminate your anger. So we could go piece by piece like this in this particular discourse, but even also over here in this one where the Buddha is talking about what leads to hell, animal realm, and afflicted spirits. You could look at each one of these and realize it would be unwise, for example, to have argumentative speech, and you should eliminate that. It's unwise to have harsh speech. You should eliminate that. It's wise to eliminate idle chatter, that it's wise to eliminate ingesting substances that cause heedlessness. So while these discourses are helping you to see the rebirth and what's occurring in those rebirths, okay, that's fine. But your ultimate goal, if you're on the path to enlightenment, is not to experience rebirth. So those things, while it's helpful to know and understand, it really doesn't matter, because if you're making your way to enlightenment in this life, you're not going to be reborn anywhere anyway. So the same things that are leading to rebirth in the lower realms, those are the things that you're interested in eliminating and abandoning. Those things that lead to rebirth in the heavenly realm, those are things that you're interested in cultivating, not because you're interested in being reborn in the heavenly realm, but because you're interested in getting to enlightenment. Because the heavenly realm isn't a permanent existence, and those beings still need to get to enlightenment. You're looking to escape all of this by getting to the peace and the joy in the enlightened mind. So this is how I suggest that you use a discourses like this, is to use it as a way to identify the things you need to cultivate, wholesome qualities in the mind, and the things that you need to abandon in terms of unwholesome qualities in the mind. And that's what's going to lead to your enlightenment in this life. So any questions on this chapter? Okay, looks like we have a question on Wat Tung. Go ahead, guys.
Yes, thank you. Can you please explain, seems like the Buddha was against the Brahmins and that caste system, but then he recommends giving gifts to them and asking them for advice. Yeah,
so the Buddha isn't for or against anything. He's not taking positions and having opinions and things like this. This is what we do in the unenlightened state. By the time you get to enlightenment, you know the truth of what is true and what is false. You don't have beliefs and opinions. You just know the truth and what would be wise and unwise. And other people aren't going to necessarily understand this. But the Brahmin were individuals who were definitely doing things opposite of what the Buddha does in certain situations. Like they were doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. But they were teaching a certain amount of moral conduct to the people that they were serving. So while he knew that the rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship was unwise and it doesn't lead to any wholesome results, they were sharing a certain amount of moral conduct. So in addition to people sharing offerings with him, people also shared offerings with the Brahmin in order to help them. And the Buddha sometimes talks about this, but also the Brahmin made offerings to the monks as well. So you'll see him talking about this, but it's important that you don't think of it as he's for or against certain things or he's advocating for anything. This is the way you'll see some people talking about the Buddha, but that's not what a Buddha does. A Buddha knows exactly what it takes to get to enlightenment. Their mind's peaceful and joyful. They're not trying to convince anybody of anything. They're not trying to force anybody to do anything. They're just guiding all those with a sincere interest that have an interest to get to enlightenment of how to do that. And Brahmins were studying with him, but they were also practicing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, and they were also sharing some moral conduct. So he advised people to practice generosity with everybody, not just Brahmins, but other people as well. But sometimes he includes them when he's talking about making offerings to ascetics and Brahmins. But also, if you look at other parts of his teachings, he talks about how once you remove doubt from your mind, that it would be impossible for you to make an offering to anybody other than someone who is a member of his community. Because by the time you get to the point where you deeply understand the teachings and you've seen the improvement to the condition of your mind, it would be impossible for you to make an offering to anyone else, because you know that those teachings aren't leading to enlightenment, or those rites and rituals and ceremonies that the Brahmin were doing doesn't actually lead to enlightenment. So you'll see places like this where he's talking about, practice generosity, because you need to practice generosity with lots of people in order to get to enlightenment. But at the same time, by the time you eliminate any kind of doubt, you're only going to be interested in making offerings to the people who are sharing the teachings that have led to the improvement to the condition of your mind. And you will have seen that by the time you really develop your mind very closely.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So I'm not seeing any questions anywhere else. So we'll just move on to the next chapter here, chapter 53. Is there someone who would like to volunteer to read this one? Okay, Wat Tung.
8 worldly conditions. Gain and loss, shame and fame, blame and praise, pleasure and pain. These conditions that people meet are impermanent, transient, and subject to change. A wise and mindful person knows them and sees that they are subject to change. Desirable conditions don't excite his mind, nor is he saddened by undesirable conditions.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. So here, these are 8 things that one might experience in life. You might experience gain, like material possessions and wealth, but then you might experience loss of your material possessions and wealth. You might experience shame, and then you might experience fame, blame or praise, or pleasure and pain. And what the Buddha is ultimately getting to is helping you to understand that all these things are impermanent, that they aren't permanent, because the mind's going to want to crave and long and yearn for gain. And you're going to get so excited when you have a gain in your life. But then when you experience loss, you'll be sad and frustrated. Or if you have fame, you'll get so excited. But then when there's shame, you'll feel sad or angry or frustrated. And the same thing with praise. You'll get really excited with that. And then when you're experiencing this blame, you'll feel sad and frustrated. And then the same thing with pleasure and pain. I put this in a chart here because not only do you have the words of the Buddha, but you have words from me, or you have the reference back to the Pali Canon, but then you also have words from me to be able to help you in each one of these chapters. So here there's this desirable condition, which is gain, fame, praise, and pleasure. And oftentimes when someone's experiencing that, they get conditional pleasant feelings like happy, excited, elated. But then when you experience the undesirable, then you, like loss, shame, blame, and pain, you experience painful feelings. And what the Buddha is teaching you is that by the time you cultivate your mind, when your mind is wise of these teachings and you have mindfulness, and you can see that all these things are subject to change, meaning you understand that they're all impermanent, you're not going to get happy and excited when you have desirable things that are happening, and you're not going to get saddened when there's undesirable things happening. By the time you get to enlightenment and you've extinguished all your cravings, desires, attachments, in fact, you won't even see things as desirable or undesirable. It's just not going to happen for you, that you just see things as this is what is. But in the unenlightened state, when you have craving, you'll see certain things as desirable or undesirable, or you'll see things as agreeable or disagreeable. And now the mind's going to experience either excitement or certain painful feelings are going to come in. But by the time you get to this wise part where you've fully cultivated the mind and you're practicing mindfulness and purifying the mind, you will have seen that all these things are impermanent and they don't lead to lasting satisfaction. So when certain pleasurable things are happening, your mind doesn't cling to it and you don't form your inner feelings based on these things. So for example, if somebody was experiencing gain as an enlightened being and maybe they're experiencing improvement in their income, they're not going to get so excited about that because they know that this income is impermanent. And it doesn't lead to lasting satisfaction. It's just like, okay, they're experiencing gain. But then also if they experience loss in their income and certain wealth, they're not going to experience any sad feelings there either. They just understand that they're just gradually making their way forward in life. But in the unenlightened state, you'll experience these highs, these pleasurable feelings, and you'll experience these lows. But by the time you get to enlightenment, just everything is enjoyable. And you're just gradually making your way in life, making wise decisions. So the Buddha is kind of giving you guys this in kind of like a summary format here in a really short discourse. So do you guys have any questions here?
Hi, I have a question that that is not permanent or loss or for negative things, but how can we deal with the feeling that if good things is not permanent, how can we control ourselves for feeling afraid to have it? For example, if we feel happy for this time, but we know that it's not permanent, how can we to adjust our feelings about it to afraid being losing it? Thank you.
Sure. What you need to be able to do is you need to eliminate the causes and conditions that are producing those conditional pleasant feelings. In the unenlightened state, there's a cause and condition that the mind, say, for example, if it's sunny outside, you will get happy. And then if it's raining outside, you will get sad. This is the mind forming conditioned feelings that based on your cravings, desires, your longing, your yearning, your wanting, you will get happy when you get what you want, and you will get sad when you don't get what you want. But that happiness is ultimately displeasing because it's only temporary. It arises, it changes, and it fades away. This is what the unenlightened mind is doing, is it's forming its inner feelings based on some condition. That based on something happening in the world, you'll be either happy or you'll be sad. But all these things in the world are impermanent. So if you form your inner feelings based on something in the world, then you can't experience permanent happiness. What the Buddha is guiding you to be able to do is get to permanent happiness. But in order to get to permanent happiness, you're going to need to be able to let go of the temporary happiness. And the temporary happiness is coming from the mind's craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning, the holding on to things and wanting them to be permanent. So if you're holding on to a boyfriend or girlfriend, for example, as long as you guys are together, you'll be happy. But when you guys are apart, you'll feel sad, you'll feel lonely, you'll feel bored, you'll miss this person, or you'll be angry or frustrated. So you need to learn how to be happy when you're together, but you need to be happy when you're apart too. And this is what the training on the Eightfold Path is going to help your mind to be able to do. So there isn't just one thing for me to explain to you that's going to help you to be able to get to this enlightened mental state. I would suggest that you start off with volume 1, like Jose was talking about. Now that he's been reading volume 1, he's had a lot of improvement to the condition of his mind, just kind of starting from the beginning. And there's a number of students all throughout the world that are experiencing that. So if you start with the first volume of the book series, and you can get it by downloading it for free from our website, you can take that file and go print it if you like. You can get a printed version at the temple by reimbursing us for the printing cost, or you can get it from Amazon. And if you start with the first volume, you can gradually build up your practice to train your mind to no longer form conditioned feelings, where based on some condition, you'll be happy. So if it's sunny outside, you'll be happy. if your bank account is this level, you'll be happy. Or if your mom and dad do this, you'll be happy. You would like to get to the point where those things that are occurring, you don't get excited about them. Because if you get excited about them, then it's only a matter of time before that condition changes due to impermanence, and your mind's going to end up in the painful feelings. So you need to essentially retrain your mind so that you can just be happy all the time. But you won't know how to do that until you dive into the teachings and learn how to purify the mind of the causes and conditions that are causing it to go up and down like this. Okay, I'm going to check one more time and see if we have any questions. I don't see any anywhere. All right, so let's go to this next chapter, which is chapter 54. So someone who would like to read this one?
Okay, can I read?
Sure.
Deeds with fruit that result in great accomplishment and power. Having cultivated for 7 years a mind of loving kindness, for 7 eons of contraction and expansion, I did not return to this world. Whenever the eon contracted, I reached the plane of streaming radiance, and when the eon expanded, I arose in an empty heavenly mansion. And then there I was, Brahma, God, the great Brahma, the unvanquished victor, the all-knowing, the all-powerful. 36 times I was Sakam, ruler of the heavenly beings. And many hundreds of times I was a wheel-turning monarch, righteous, a king of righteousness, conqueror of the 4 regions of the earth, maintaining stability in the land and possession of the 7 treasures. What need is there to speak of mere local kingship? It occurred to me, monks, to wonder, of what kind of deed of mine is this the fruit? Of what deeds ripening am I now of such great accomplishment and power? And then it occurred to me, it is the fruit of the 3 kinds of deeds of mine, the ripening of 3 kinds of deeds, that I am now of such great accomplishment and power. Deeds of giving, of mastery of the mind, and of refraining.
Okay, thank you, Helena. So here the Buddha is recounting just a little bit of his past lives and kind of talking about those a bit. And then ultimately what he gets to is he says, what need is there to speak of a mere local kingship? Because he was destined to become a king. And he's saying who cares essentially about being a king when, I've already been these other things in the past, and I've already experienced these other things in the past. And now his mind, being a Buddha and having gotten to enlightenment by himself, where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, he's saying, what is it that led me to this mental state? What is it that allowed me to actually attain this mental state of enlightenment? Well, of course, there's many teachings that he shares that's going to share with you how he actually attained this mental state. But these are 3 things that he's highlighting as these are the things that are leading to his development of his mind to actually get to enlightenment. The first one is practicing generosity, deeds of giving. He was a prince destined to become a king, but he practiced an enormous amount of generosity in his last life, but also in his previous lives as well. So he highlights generosity as something that he practiced in order to be able to actually get to enlightenment. And you can see this for yourself. If you practice generosity, you can see it trains the mind to let go, where you're giving and sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources without any expectation of anything in return. This is going to help you get closer and closer to enlightenment by eliminating selfishness. Then he talks about this mastery of the mind. This is like disciplining the mind through meditation and through all the mental discipline section of the Eightfold Path, the right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. That's what's helped to lead him to this mental state of enlightenment. And then from refraining, where he eliminated certain things like killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, intoxicants, and judgment and conceit and arrogance and pride and boastfulness and all kinds of things that you're going to need to restrain your mind from. It's almost like riding a horse and pulling the reins back, because your mind with craving, desire, attachment is going to be longing, yearning, and chasing after things. And you're going to need to pull it back and rein it in. And that's what he's talking about here, is refraining and restraining the mind. So it's generosity, discipline of the mind, and essentially restraining the mind. That's what is kind of like three highlighted things that it's going to take in order to guide an individual to enlightenment and to actually for that individual to experience enlightenment. Any questions on this chapter? Okay, we have a question coming in on YouTube here. This is from Janae. Why do enlightened beings still experience pleasant feelings? If pleasant feelings are discontentedness, then wouldn't an enlightened being not feel this? It's important to understand the difference between conditioned pleasant feelings and the feelings that are experienced as an unconditioned mental state. I describe that as a mental state, even though I just mentioned feelings. It's actually a mental state that one is experiencing. In the unenlightened state, you'll experience conditional feelings. They arise, they change, and they fade away. They're pleasant, painful, and neither painful nor pleasant. It's if this condition is met, and 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 then you'll be happy. And that means your happiness becomes less and less and less and less and less, because the more expectations you have, the more things you want, then your happiness becomes less. So if it's sunny outside, if my bank account is this, if my mom and dad do this, if my boss does this, if my life partner does this, if my children do this, then I will be happy, right? And the idea of all those things matching up and actually staying that way is impractical. It's not possible. So these are called conditional pleasant feelings, that you can only experience happiness if these conditions are met. By the time you get to enlightenment, you've purified the mind of all of that. And now your mind can just naturally be happy all the time. It can be joyful all the time. This is the mental state of happiness, where the mind is unconditioned. It's been purified of all the impurities, and now you're experiencing the unconditioned mental state of peace, calm, serenity, and contentedness with joy. So by the time someone gets to enlightenment, we don't refer to what they're experiencing as feelings, because a feeling is something based on a condition. But by the time you get to enlightenment, it's an unconditioned mental state that is just always there. The mind is always happy, always joyful. You're not joyful because there's a war. You're joyful despite there's a war. You're not joyful because your mom died. You're joyful despite that. You're not joyful because you got a raise at work. You're just joyful because you're joyful. So you're not basing your inner feelings on some condition. So this is what an enlightened being is experiencing. Okay, not seeing any other questions anywhere. So, looks like Wat Tung Yu has a question. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So if in order to be reborn as a monarch or as a king or queen, something like that, someone must have had accumulated a lot of wholesome karma and those 3 jewels that the Buddha is talking about, then how is it possible that people born into power sometimes or often get corrupted? How could they have lost that wisdom up to such a drastic point?
Yeah, so let's just say in a previous life, somebody produced a certain amount of wholesome karma, and now they're reborn as a king, right? Well, once you're reborn, you're not reborn with all the wisdom that you had in your previous life. It's not like you're starting off right where you left off in your last life. You're still have craving and you still have ignorance when you're born. So now, as you're in this new life, your mind is experiencing the cultivation of either craving, anger, and ignorance, where you're developing that more and more, or you're developing generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, the wholesome roots. Which direction somebody walks is a choice of their own, whether you're walking towards the darkness of craving, anger, and ignorance, or you're walking towards the light of generosity, loving kindness, or wisdom. These are choices that an individual is making. There's no being that's controlling that. There's no conditions in terms of the outside world that's doing that. It's the choices that an individual makes. So even though they might have gotten to a certain point in their previous life to be reborn as a king in this life, what they choose to do in this life is based on the decisions that they're making in this life. And someone could choose to walk towards the darkness, or they could choose to walk towards the light. Which direction they walk is up to them, because they don't have the same exact wisdom that they had in their previous life.
But there should have a tendency towards wisdom at the very least, right?
Not necessarily. There's certain things that someone's going to have in their previous life that they're not necessarily going to have in this life. It's not like they're starting right where they left off in their previous life. It's not a serial progression. It's not like a gradual upward direction. There's this twisting, winding road. You can think about your life here. I don't know a whole lot about your life, Helen. I just know a little bit. But, you've probably had certain times of your life where you're into more wholesome things. You might have had certain times in your life where you're into more unwholesome things. And that might have went up and down. I know my life was like that. There were times when I was young that I was into really unwholesome things. But then I started doing some wholesome things for a little while. But then I went back to doing some unwholesome things. And then I went back to doing wholesome things again. And, you can kind of go up and down like this throughout one particular life based on the decisions that an individual is making.
But I don't really see it this way. I really can't see a progression towards wisdom. As the older I get, the more I know, not less. So there seems to be an evolutionary line in my life and in things that I see in the world. And what does Buddhism tell about evolution? Say about evolution?
The Buddha doesn't talk about evolution as a species as a whole so much, but the path to enlightenment is about each individual evolving as a human being. But you got to keep in mind that what you're experiencing isn't what everybody experiences. This is what the unenlightened mind oftentimes thinks, is because whatever you're experiencing, you might think that everybody's experiencing that same thing. But remember, there's impermanence. So if your life has been a gradual progression, great, that's wonderful. But that's not the way everybody's life is. And you shouldn't think that all other beings are experiencing the same things that you're experiencing. There's all different kind of variations of this. So it's great that your life has been such that you're gradually developing wisdom, and maybe your life's becoming better and better. I'm not sure, but you shouldn't think that that's what everyone else is experiencing too. So someone could be reborn into a lot of darkness into the world, right? Into a really harsh family, and then they could gradually grow towards improvement. But you could also be born into a very rich and influential and wealthy family, and you can make unwise decisions that takes you deeper and deeper into the darkness. Just because you're reborn into a rich, wealthy family doesn't mean you're just going to continue to make upward progression from there. You can go in the opposite direction. And this is the universal truth of impermanence. To think otherwise would be to think that there's permanence. So if you think that every being who's born into a wealthy, affluent family is going to have upward progression, that's the permanence that your mind is thinking about. But that's not what we see in the world. We see impermanence. Some people that's born as a king, they're going to continue to improve and gain more and more wisdom and improve their life. Some people are going to go deeper into the darkness. This is impermanence.
But if a being expands their wisdom, if they acquire wisdom and then they regress from that point, then it seems like it wasn't wisdom. Because once you acquire some wisdom, it changes you permanently.
Yes, that's the case, that if you acquire wisdom, it will change the decisions that you make, but not everybody's doing that. And whatever wisdom somebody acquired in a previous life, they're not going to have that same wisdom in this life.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let me see if we have any other questions here. All right, so let's go to the next one, chapter 55. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, go ahead, Pat.
An unsurpassed field of merit for the world. Monks, these 8 persons are worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of reverential salutation, an unsurpassed field of merit for the world. What 8? the stream enterer, the one practicing for realization of the fruit of stream entry, the once returner, the one practicing for realization of the fruit of once returning, the non-returner, the one practicing for realization of the fruit of non-returning, the arahant, the one practicing for realization of the fruit of arahantship. These 8 persons, monks, are worthy of gifts, worthy of hospitality, worthy of offerings, worthy of reverential salutation, an unsurpassed field of merit for the world. The 4 practicing the way and the 4 established in the fruit, this is the upright community, composed in wisdom and virtuous behavior, moral conduct. For people intent on sacrifice, for living beings seeking merit, making merit that ripens in the acquisitions, which is given to the community, bears great fruits.
Okay, thank you, Pat. So this is a discourse that I teach in all the foundational classes that I teach, because the Buddha is guiding you about how to create merit. And what merit is it's basically when you're practicing generosity and you're directing that towards the continuation of the teachings of the Buddha, so that more and more people can learn wisdom and understand how to cultivate the mind to get to enlightenment. And the Buddha teaches you of individuals that you would be interested to practice generosity with, who are then going to be sharing the teachings in the world to help others be able to get to enlightenment. And he's sharing these 8 individuals that it would be wise to share offerings with. And this is where, by you making offerings to those individuals, they would then be able to continue to develop and cultivate their mind, and then be able to offer teachings to others to be able to then cultivate their mind. When he's talking about stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, and arahant, these are the 4 stages of enlightenment. Stream enterer is the first stage, once returner is the second stage, non-returner is the third stage, and arahant is where your mind is actually enlightened. That's an enlightened being where the mind's been completely purified. And what the Buddha is saying is that it would be wise to make offerings to one of these 8 people, because by you coming in contact with one of these people, it provides you the opportunity to be able to cultivate wisdom and train your mind closer and closer to enlightenment, because these are the individuals that have the wisdom to be able to guide you to enlightenment. And the Buddha then talks down here about how by making offerings, it helps to ripen in the acquisitions. This is you being able to get to either the first, second, third, or fourth stage of enlightenment. And then he talks about what's given to the community bears great fruit, because whenever you're making offerings to a teacher or to a temple or something like this, you should see that those people are using a certain portion of those offerings in order to support their life, like food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. But you should also see offerings coming back to the community. You should see a nice center to be able to come and learn and grow and develop and take courses and classes and retreats to meditate. Certain classes and courses are being offered, and these things should be offered at no cost. As soon as somebody puts a price tag on their classes and courses, it basically takes away the ability of the students to practice generosity to then be able to get to enlightenment. And it also takes away the ability of disadvantaged beings to be able to then get access to the teachings that they need. So, for example, if I charged $100 for this particular class today, then that means anybody who could afford that would be able to pay for it. But the people who really need it the most, the disadvantaged beings, they wouldn't be able to pay for it. So that means they're going to be stuck and they're going to be trapped without getting this wisdom to be able to improve their life. So the Buddha teaches us as teachers that we should give and we should share the teachings so that other people can learn and develop, so that they can cultivate wisdom and improve their life. And then it's up to the students to be able to choose if they would like to share offerings with us to be able to continue to share the teachings. Because while we offer the teachings at no cost, there is a certain cost associated with sharing the teachings. You know, there's certain microphones and computers and air conditioning, electric, water, things like this that we need to be able to purchase in order to share the teachings. So whenever there's offerings being made to a teacher or a temple, you should see a small portion of that going towards helping that individual to sustain their life, but then there should be certain offerings that are coming back to the community. And that's what the Buddha is saying about what's given to the community bears great fruit, because it produces the ability for more and more wisdom to be shared in the world and for more and more people to learn how to attain enlightenment. So do you guys have any questions here on this chapter? You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions anywhere. Oops. So I'm going to move on to this next chapter, which should be chapter 56. Let's see. Okay, is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Wat Tung, you?
People who generate much merit, wholesome karma. Monks, whenever virtuous monastics come to a home, the people there generate much merit, wholesome karma, on 5 grounds. What 5? When people see virtuous monastics come to their home and they arouse hearts of confidence towards them, on that occasion that family is practicing the way conducive to heaven. When people rise, pay homage, respect, and offer a seat to virtuous monastics who come to their home, on that occasion that family is practicing the way conducive to birth in high families. When people remove the stain of selfishness towards virtuous monastics who come to their home, on that occasion that family is practicing the way conducive to great influence. When, according to their means, people share what they have with virtuous monastics who come to their home, on that occasion that family is practicing the way conducive to great wealth. When people question virtuous monastics who come to their home, make inquiries about the teachings, and listen to the teachings, on that occasion that family is practicing the way conducive to great wisdom. Monks, whenever virtuous monastics come to a home, the people there generate much merit, wholesome karma, on these 5 grounds.
All right, thank you, Rachel. So here, the Buddha is sharing things that we can do in order to cultivate merit and this wholesome karma, essentially, which is what merit is. It's practicing generosity towards the teachers and the individuals who are sharing the teachings so that they can continue to be shared in the world. And the Buddha is talking about, again here, certain things that are going to happen for rebirth. But as I mentioned to you, when you see a discourse like this, you can learn those kinds of things, but I suggest you set those things aside and just look at what is he teaching that is going to actually lead to improvement in your life today. So here what he's saying is okay, when people see virtuous monastics, that means people who are practicing good, wholesome moral conduct, who are sharing the teachings of the Buddha as an ordained practitioner, come to their home, they arouse hearts of confidence towards them. Whereas if you're sitting there doubting the teacher, if you're like constantly trying to pick holes in what it is that they're teaching and constantly trying to find, all these conflicts in a disgruntled, agitated way, this is not going to produce beneficial results in your life. You need to have confidence and develop this confidence. Yes, investigating the teachings and examining the teachings, reflecting on them to independently verify them and then practice them. But if you're kind of vindictively looking for ways to trying to poke holes in what's going on, this isn't what the Buddha is actually teaching. Instead, he's sharing with you to have this confidence in the people who are sharing the teachings. And then you can build more and more confidence as you're learning, as you're independently verifying, and as you're practicing, you can see the improvement to the condition of the mind. Because the ordained practitioners during the lifetime of the Buddha were actually invited into people's home. Kind of like here, I was invited into the home of the individuals that are hosting me here in Mexico for the last 3 months. And I've been helping them, not just in the classes, but at home too, with their children, with their relationships and things like this, with between their parents and their siblings and all kinds of different things that people have been asking me questions about. And that's having some confidence in the person that you're inviting into your home, and then learning from that individual, and of course, questioning and asking questions. And then the Buddha is saying, okay, when these people come to your home, it's wise to rise up and pay respect and kind of offer them a seat. And then also when people are coming to your home, it's wise, and these are teachers, of course, that are sharing the teachings, remove the stain of selfishness towards them by making them offerings of food, clothing, shelter, and medical care. And today people offer resources like financial support and things like that as well. And then he shares here in number 4 that according to their means, people share what they have, right? This is your time, effort, energy, and resources. But then lastly, and this is kind of common with the Buddha, the way that he teaches is he'll oftentimes put one of the most important things last, is that when you have a teacher among you and you've gone to visit a teacher And even though the Buddha is talking about here at one's home, whether you've gone to the temple or you've gone to someone's home or you've invited someone to your home that is going to be sharing the teachings, it's important to make inquiries about the teachings, that you question and you ask questions and then you listen and you do that. And by doing so, you're practicing the way conducive to cultivating wisdom. This is what you would ultimately like to be able to accomplish in order to make your way to enlightenment, is cultivating wisdom. And that's what's going to help you to be able to awaken the mind and get to enlightenment. But if going back to this first one, if you didn't have confidence in the person that you were learning with, it's going to be very hard for you to cultivate that wisdom, because you're going to be constantly trying to poke holes in what it is that they're sharing, rather than taking a real concerted effort to understand what they're teaching and then ask questions about it respectfully, and then learn and grow and develop based on what's actually being shared. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is chapter 56, people who generate much merit. Okay, Wat Tung, you questions?
Thank you. So I started noticing a pattern, and what Buddhism has in common with some religions, I would say the most important ones in the world, is that it externalizes, in a sense, in spiritual growth. It delegates spiritual growth to some kind of teachers. I mean that it's impossible to get to enlightenment by yourself, right? And I would like to ask, why does this seem to be a pattern in all religions, even though I know that the Buddhism that we are learning here is not a religion, but it's related to religion, and it has some common grounds with it. And secondly, how and if Buddhism is different in this aspect from some other religions, like, for example, Hinduism, where it is very clearly said that you can't get to enlightenment without a guru, based on my understanding.
Okay, so is your question, why is it that someone can't get to enlightenment by themselves? Is that your question?
So the first question is, why is it, in your opinion, a pattern that appears in religions, including Buddhism? And second question is, how and if Buddhism is different from those other philosophical systems and religions in this aspect?
Sure. Yeah, I can't speak on other things like Christianity, Hinduism, Muslim teachings. I mean, I obviously have some background and understanding of Christianity, but I know very little about Hinduism and very little about Muslim teaching, so I can't really comment on that. I can only comment on what the Buddha taught, because that's what I'm familiar with and that's what I know. If you look at what the Buddha taught, and you might be able to relate this on your own to the things that you know about other traditions, is that in order to get to enlightenment, you have to cultivate wisdom. That's what's going to awaken your mind. And you can't get to wisdom as an individual person by yourself enough to get to enlightenment. You can cultivate certain wisdom about the world and certain things that are going on in your day-to-day life. But in terms about how to get to enlightenment and how to awaken to that point where the mind's peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, the only person who would be able to do that by themselves would be an actual Buddha, because they accumulate wisdom over multiple lifetimes. For example, before you started studying with the teachings of the Buddha, you didn't even know necessarily what was causing your anger and your sadness and frustration. You just couldn't see it because you had a lack of wisdom about what was actually causing it. So once you started learning and somebody was able to guide you and show you what is actually leading to your discontent feelings, then you could see it through your own independent verification. So in order to cultivate wisdom, you need a teacher and a guide to be able to do that. And that's what's going to help you to be able to see it and understand it. And then you can then independently verify it. And along the way, as you're on your journey, you're going to need to look to that teacher for clarity to be able to understand certain aspects of the teachings. And then above and beyond that, an individual who's unenlightened, they can't see their entire mind. They don't see when they're being grumpy and irritable necessarily. They don't see when they're practicing wrong speech. They don't see when they're being arrogant and egotistical, for example. So a teacher being objective about what it is that they're guiding their students towards is that they can objectively look at their student's mind and they can point out to their student like, hey, you're clinging to your perceptions here, or hey, you're having some arrogance or pride here, or hey, you're having some resentfulness here, and these kinds of things. A student who is unenlightened can't see those things, because if they could see those things and they understood how impactful they are to their life, they wouldn't actually be doing them. But because an individual doesn't see those things, they continue to do those things and they continue to struggle. So a person whose mind is awake, they're going to be able to see in their students these defilements and these pollutions, and then point it out to them so that they're able to then eliminate them and eradicate them from the mind, where an individual who's unenlightened, that's not a Buddha, wouldn't be able to do that. And then lastly, a student that's learning with a teacher, one of the things that is being accomplished there is the student is working on eliminating their ego, their arrogance, their pride, their boastfulness. They're putting themselves above people or putting themselves below people. So deciding that I would like to learn with a teacher, and they humble their mind enough to be able to learn from this particular teacher, it's actually helping them to eliminate their ego. Whereas if they didn't have a teacher and they weren't a Buddha, then oftentimes the ego can be in there. So just the very act of learning with the teacher humbles the mind to a certain degree. And this is very helpful in the path to enlightenment. So these are some of the reasons why a teacher is so important, is they need to cultivate wisdom. They need to be able to have the teacher point out to them the certain areas of their practice that aren't well developed, like if they have wrong speech, or if they're clinging to perceptions, or they're having arrogance or pride or things like that. And then it also helps them to eliminate a certain amount of ego and arrogance by taking on a teacher and admitting to themselves that they don't know what it takes to get to enlightenment. And these things combined are just part of what a teacher is doing for them.
I see, but I also see that it potentially creates danger, because if from the get-go we assume that we cannot cultivate wisdom by ourselves and we need to externalize that, then we become dependent on the teachers. And how can we really know that the teachers have cultivated wisdom, since we cannot do it by ourselves? So we could be misled potentially, right? We have many teachers in the world.
No, if you're learning and practicing the way that I teach, you wouldn't be misled, because the way that I teach is I teach people that they're on their own independent journey to enlightenment, that their goal is to cultivate wisdom. It's not that you can't cultivate wisdom, it's that you need the guidance and the teachings to be able to then independently verify it and cultivate it yourself. So each individual person who's getting to enlightenment, you are going to cultivate wisdom. That's your only way to get to enlightenment. You have the capability to cultivate wisdom, but you need a teacher to guide you, like a tour guide. So a teacher, if they're guiding you in the way that I guide students, is they're guiding you to be your own independent practitioner, that you are cultivating the wisdom, that it's your own independent journey to enlightenment. And a teacher is pointing out the resources and the certain teachings that you need to learn, but then you're doing that work. Because, for example, like one of the common things that students have trouble with is just, where do I start? They don't even know where to start. They don't even realize that they need to learn the 3 universal truths and the 4 noble truths first. And then they need to learn the moral conduct. And then they need to learn the mental discipline. So they need like a tour guide to help them along the way. And the way that you ensure that you're not being misled is that you learn, you examine and investigate, you reflect on those teachings to independently verify them, and then you practice them. And as you're practicing them, you'll see the improvement to the condition of the mind. And that's how you can ensure that you're not being misled, because you can independently verify a teacher's teachings. And any teacher who's teaching you to have non-attachment, they're not going to be interested in you being attached to them. So when you talk about being dependent on a teacher, that's not what I would advise anybody to do. You shouldn't be dependent on a teacher. You should be looking to cultivate wisdom yourself and use your teacher like a tour guide in order to point out to you the things that you need to learn. And then when you're struggling and having difficulties, you have somebody to reach out to, because you're not going to be able to cultivate your mind to the point of enlightenment without any guidance whatsoever. You're going to need a tour guide along the way, but you should retain the understanding that you're the one who's doing the cultivation of the wisdom, but you need a tour guide. You need somebody to help you along the way, but you shouldn't be dependent on that person and reliant on that person, but instead you reach out to that person for guidance, through classes, courses, and retreats, through resources, through personal guidance, and all these other things.
I don't understand how can one be on an independent journey and at the same time on a guided trip, like with a tour guide.
Sure. So the way that this works is that an individual student needs to retain the responsibility that you are responsible for your own wisdom. You're responsible for your own growth and your own development. It's you that needs to decide to come to the temple. It's you that needs to decide to pick up the book and read it. It's you that needs to decide to meditate. It's you that needs to decide to reach out and ask for help. But as you're doing that, it's the teacher's role to be able to observe your mind and know where you're at in your practice, so that now we can provide you the resources that you need and the guidance that you need to now work on this independent journey. Because without the books, without the words of the Buddha, without the guidance of how to meditate, you wouldn't know how to meditate. Or without the guidance of the Four Noble Truths, you wouldn't know what to focus on. So you need to retain the responsibility for your own growth and development, but you need to look to a teacher to point the way. So essentially a Buddha is pointing the way, and then others are striving. So you need to retain the responsibility for your own growth and development while looking to a teacher for the resources. So the teacher is essentially providing the map, and you're the one who's choosing to walk with that map.
Okay, but how can I be responsible for my wisdom if I don't have the tools to assess gain of that wisdom and I can't cultivate it enough by myself? Then it seems like the teacher would be responsible for the wisdom.
No, the teacher is responsible to provide you the resources that you need. And then it's up to you to be able to gradually make your way through that. So again, going with this analogy of navigating, the teacher gives you the map. And then it's up to the student to walk from one location to the other. And along the way, as you're walking from point A to point B, if you're having difficulties figuring out the map, then you ask the teacher, hey, can you help me with this map? But it's you that's retaining the responsibility to walk from point A to point B, and the teacher's there as a guide to help you.
So he or she is giving me the map to enlightenment, yes? And the journey is the journey to enlightenment?
Yes.
So, okay, so I understand now. It logically seems that it is necessary that the teacher is enlightened, because otherwise they wouldn't have the map, right?
Right. So a teacher who is teaching, they should either be enlightened or very close to it. And in order to guide someone to enlightenment, they would need to be able to know all the path to be able to guide someone. There's details in the teachings of the Buddha where he says that if you still have craving, anger, and ignorance in your mind, you'd find it very difficult to guide other people to enlightenment. So this is where if you spend time with a teacher and you understand what enlightenment is, you can observe the quality of their mind, and you can see that they don't get angry, they don't get frustrated, they don't get agitated or annoyed, and you can see that they're enlightened. But oftentimes an unenlightened mind has difficulties in understanding how to determine whether someone is or isn't enlightened. So that's why in volume 1, at the end of chapter 3, I listed out about 6 or 8 different questions that you can go through to be able to determine whether someone is actually enlightened or not. And the Buddha provides the same guidance too, but he provides it in a more general, very basic sense. He says that what you should do is observe the mind of a teacher, and if you see that it's concentrated and clear and focused, and they can talk at ease about the teachings, then you know that this person is either enlightened or very close to it. Or that if their mind is muddled and lacking concentration and focus and clarity, then you know that their mind is still polluted, so therefore they can't be enlightened. So anybody who's enlightened, they would have a very clear dialogue about the teachings. They would have very precise teachings, be able to explain them very clearly, because their mind is very clear on what the teachings are and what the teachings aren't.
Okay, and lastly, the Buddha was the one who provided the map originally, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And then it's being passed from generation to generation. But then it seems logical to me that one could get to enlightenment with the original map only, which is only reading Pali Canon and perhaps some associated texts without a teacher, like a human teacher?
It would be impossible for someone to just read the Pali Canon and get to enlightenment. It would just not be possible at all, because the Pali Canon isn't 100% of what the Buddha actually taught. Over the last 2,500 years, the Pali Canon is not in a pristine condition, and there's some things that we know that the Buddha taught that aren't actually in the Pali Canon. So, for example, we can see in the Pali Canon that the Buddha taught loving kindness meditation. That loving kindness meditation leads to the elimination of anger, hatred, and ill will. But how the Buddha actually did loving kindness meditation, it's not in the Pali Canon. That's been lost. So what you need to be able to do is find a teacher who's eliminated anger, hatred, ill will, and all those lesser versions, so that then whatever they're practicing as loving kindness meditation, it led to their elimination of anger, hatred, and ill will. So therefore, it'll lead to your elimination of anger, hatred, and ill will as well. So it would be utterly impossible for someone to pick up the Pali Canon, read a book, and actually get to enlightenment. Let's just say that a Buddha actually wrote an entire book or an entire book series of exactly what it takes to get to enlightenment. Even in that situation, reading a book that was written by an actual Buddha, you still wouldn't be able to just read a book and get to enlightenment, because you need somebody to guide you of what comes first, what comes second. You're not going to be able to read the book and understand it 100%. You're not going to be able to see the defilements in your own mind. You're not going to be able to see the complications and difficulties and struggles that you're having along the way. You'll know that you're discontent, but you won't see yourself, for example, clinging to a perception. You won't even know what a perception is until a teacher shares it with you. So the idea of reading a book and getting to enlightenment is just not possible, because there's too many touch points that are needed from a teacher. Like, for example, here in Mexico, the students that are hosting me, they're just blown away with how much I'm able to observe their day-to-day life and their interactions with their life partner and their children and stuff like this, and how I'm able to show them exactly what it is that they need to improve about their practice in order to get to enlightenment. There are certain things that they were doing that they had no idea that this was even part of, say, gossip or slander, for example. And then once I was able to see that and help them see it in a very kind and polite and respectful way, they got it and they understood it and they were able to improve their practice. But had they not invited a teacher into their home like they have, they wouldn't have been able to see that, because no matter what classes that I'm teaching, where I'm teaching about elimination of gossip and slander, for example, they don't have the teacher right there by their side, riding in a car with them, observing them and listening to them teach or listening to them talk to their life partner, their sister, their mom, to be able to point out to them, hey, this is actually slander, this is actually gossip. They had no clue of that whatsoever, and they're just blown away by how much I can see all of these things in their life. So a teacher is so very important, because you're not going to be able to see those things. Even when you read in the book that the Buddha taught, and the reasons why he taught not to gossip and slander, for example, you're not going to be able to spot your gossip and slander, because you're not going to necessarily know exactly what that is. Even teaching it in class, even writing it in a book, sometimes people are talking in ways that they don't even realize that that's gossip and slander until someone points it out to them.
But how did a teacher learn those things if he or she couldn't learn them by themselves? Then it means that it's like a lineage, right? Directly from the Buddha.
Yeah, so anybody who's enlightened, if they're not a Buddha, they would have learned from their teacher and from their teacher and their teacher and all the way back. So now each individual who, say, enlightened, they're going to then help their students in a very thoughtful and caring way and a very respectful way to learn those same kinds of things. For a Buddha, their mind is wise enough to be able to figure all these things out themselves. But for every other person, they're going to need somebody to point it out for them.
Okay, that's exactly the pattern I was talking about that I see in many religions and philosophical systems. I understand, I think. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, this is something that's vitally important, that it's not dependency on a teacher, but but it's a need to have somebody help you, because you wouldn't be able to get to enlightenment by yourself. It's just not possible. And it's not that you should be dependent on that person. You need to retain the responsibility for yourself, but you need the help and the guidance. And anybody who's enlightened and helping students, they're going to have lots of love, lots of care, lots of kindness. But oftentimes the students themselves, they can get very disgruntled and agitated and irritated, and they can, push the teachings away. And that's their choice. A teacher is here to help all those with a sincere interest to get to enlightenment. And if the students would like help, then a teacher is there for them. And if a student's not interested in help, then the student can move on and off to do something else. But you'll be able to see that it's not just lip service, that it's 100% true that you can't get to enlightenment by yourself, or otherwise you would have already done it. That's just the nature of the mind and the way that this path works, that you're going to need help and guidance along the path.
But look, right now, that's what I'm struggling to grasp. Like you say that it's needing a teacher is not being dependent on the teacher. And in my opinion, if I really need something, truly need something like water, like food to survive, then I'm dependent on those things for survival, right? So in my opinion, a true need means that we are dependent on something external.
This is what the unenlightened mind typically sees, is it sees one side or the other. It can't see the middle way. You're not used to, at this point, of learning how to have a teacher and not be attached to them. That's something that you need to learn how to do. And right now, your mind doesn't know how to do that. All you see is being dependent or being completely on the other side, where you push people away and you're not interested in having anybody around you. And that's the two sides that you see. What the Buddha is teaching and what I'm teaching you do is come to this middle way where you can learn how to reach out to someone. You can have a healthy relationship with that person. You can not be attached to that person, and you can learn and grow and develop, have a relationship, but you're not dependent on that person. Right now, you don't have the wisdom of how to do that. But if you're interested in cultivating that wisdom, there's help for you to be able to do that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm just going to take a look here, and I don't see any questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do is just end class here by just thanking all of you guys for joining. Those of you guys that are online, either Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and all of you guys that are at the temple as well. Thank you guys for your interest in learning and practicing the teachings. As you guys have help, you're more than welcome to reach out. You can get access to the teachings through our website at buddhadailywisdom.com. And you can also look at attending our other classes, like the group learning program, which meets on Sunday and Wednesday, and even our classes and courses and retreats that meet throughout the month over kind of Monday through Friday time frame. So thank you all. Thank you for joining, and thank you for your questions. And perhaps we'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and have a lovely rest of your day. Take care. Sawadee-ka.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.